Andrew had always been a man of routine. Every night, after his shift ended at the factory, he would walk to Silver Ridge Station to catch the last train home. The station was always deserted by then, a quiet and eerie place that sent shivers down his spine, even though he didn't believe in ghosts or spirits. But that belief was about to be challenged. It all started one cold winter night. Andrew was sitting on the bench, waiting for his train. The wind howled through the empty platform, and the dim lights flickered. He pulled his coat tighter around him and tried to ignore the growing sense of unease. Suddenly, he heard the soft tinkling sound of anklets. It was unusual to hear anything but the wind and the distant hum of the city at this hour. He turned around, but there was no one there. He shrugged it off, thinking it was just his imagination. After all, he was tired, and the mind could play tricks on a weary soul. The train arrived and he boarded, eager to get home. The next night, the same thing happened, and the night after that. Each time, the anklet sound grew louder and more insistent, until one night, he decided to investigate. Andrew walked towards the end of the platform, where the sound seemed to be coming from. His heart pounded in his chest as he reached the shadows, the flickering lights casting eerie patterns on the walls. Then he saw her, a woman in a red sari, her back turned towards him. She stood at the edge of the platform, her long hair cascading down her back. "Hello?" Andrew called out, his voice trembling. The woman didn't respond. She just stood there, eerily still. Andrew took a step closer, and as he did, the woman turned around slowly. Her face was partially obscured by her hair, but Andrew could see her eyes cold, lifeless, and filled with a sorrow that chilled him to the bone. "Are you all right?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The woman didn't answer. Instead, she began to walk towards the tracks. Andrew's instincts screamed at him to stop her, but he was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear. She stepped off the platform and onto the tracks, just as a freight train came barreling through. The scream that tore from Andrew's throat was primal and filled with horror as the train passed over her. But when the train was gone, so was the woman. There was no body, no trace of her at all. Andrew stood there, shaking, trying to comprehend what he had just witnessed. He stumbled back to the bench, his mind racing. Had he just seen a ghost? Was he losing his mind? The following nights were filled with terror. Andrew could no longer sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the woman's cold, lifeless eyes. He tried to tell himself it was just a hallucination, brought on by stress and exhaustion, but deep down he knew it was something more. Desperate for answers, Andrew started to ask around about the history of Silver Ridge Station. He learned from an old station master that many years ago, a woman had thrown herself in front of a train at that very platform. She had been wearing a red sari, and her death was ruled a suicide. Since then, there had been numerous reports of strange occurrences and sightings, always of a woman in red. One night, determined to put an end to the haunting, Andrew returned to the station with a priest. The priest chanted prayers and sprinkled holy water around the platform, hoping to cleanse the place of its dark past, but the ritual seemed to anger the spirit. As they were about to leave, the anklet sound started again, louder and more aggressive than ever before. The woman appeared, her eyes now blazing with fury. She moved towards them with unnatural speed. The priest's chants grew frantic, but the spirit was unstoppable. She reached out, her cold fingers brushing Andrew's arm, and he felt an icy chill spread through his body. In a desperate attempt to save himself, Andrew grabbed the priest's hand, and they ran. They sprinted out of the station and into the night, the sound of the anklets following them, echoing in the darkness. They didn't stop until they reached the safety of the city. Andrew never returned to Silver Ridge Station. He moved to a different part of the city and took up a job that didn't require late-night shifts. But the memory of that night haunted him. He could still hear the anklets sound in his dreams, and he woke up in cold sweats, feeling the icy touch of the ghostly woman. Years later, Silver Ridge Station was shut down and abandoned. The few people who still lived nearby swore they could hear the sound of anklets at night and see a figure in red standing at the edge of the platform. It became a place of legend, a story parents told their children to keep them from wandering too far at night. Andrew lived the rest of his life in fear, always looking over his shoulder, always listening for the sound of those anklets. The spirit of the woman in the red sari had marked him, and he knew, deep down, that she was still waiting for him, somewhere in the shadows.